Good evening, everyone. Calling to order Common Council for the City of Gladstone, October 13th, 2015. It is currently 6:38 p.m. At this time, call to order. We did that. Roll call, please. Our new stand-in.
Okay, Councilor Seekman.
Here.
Councilor Mercer.
Here.
Councilor Johnson.
Here.
Councilor Turner.
Not here. Absent.
Councilor McMahon.
Here. Councilor
Reisner.
Here.
Mayor Jacob Ellis.
Here. Please join me in the flag salute. Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Okay, folks, if for those who haven't been here before, if you want to speak in front of the council, there's these little yellow 5x7 or 5x8 cards in the back. Please fill them out with your name and et cetera, and bring them up to the table so we can have you talk. There'll be two, usually an early session where we take audience comments, and later on in the agenda we take a second time. So please fill those cards out. They're right on the podium there by Interim Chief Jolly. At this time, any agenda additions or corrections?
No, sir. I've got everything I need.
Okay.
Number 4A, are we really ready for a public hearing on the Doll Beach bulkhead? I mean, we're having a presentation this evening. I think there might be a need for more discussion with the Port of Portland on that issue. And while it has been properly noticed, I think that because we're talking about pretty major changes to our park, that we ought to maybe notice a little better than an amended agenda with no attachments. So I'm not sure that having a public hearing and not having people here who are stakeholders is a good idea. So I'd like to ask that it be removed.
Well, it's not requiring a vote or anything.
It says public hearing.
If I may, Counselor, there's nothing that precludes you from having another public hearing with different notifications. This has been noticed in several newspapers, so I feel like people that might have read those and shown up might have some input at this point. So
it was sent to the newspapers?
Yes, it was.
I don't recall seeing the article.
Can you hang on just a second? Kelly or Lisa?
Clackamas paper. It was in the
Clackamas Review?
Yeah.
Okay. All right. I must have missed it.
That's fine. Nobody reads that.
Okay, any other additions or corrections? Okay, at this time we'll take the first session of any business from the audience. Do we have any cards presented? Anybody want to speak at this time?
We have no cards at this time.
Okay. Our first order of business is we're going to have a presentation from the Port of Portland regarding Doll Beach Bulkhead and the Meldrum Bar Park. Kelly Madalinsky, I'm sorry. That's correct. And Lisa Glancy, I'm sorry. So please, come on up.
Is this on? Again, thank you for having us. Again, my name is,
there you go.
Okay, thanks. Again, I'm Kelly Madalinsky with the Port of Portland. I am a environmental program manager there, taking the lead, if you will, on this. And this is Lisa Glancy, who's part of our government relations affairs manager. So what I want to do is I'm really here to provide an overview and an update on this project, the Doll Beach Bulkhead Restoration Project. To quickly recap, the proposal includes 2 restoration sites within the Meldrum Park. One is removal of the bulkhead, as well as stabilizing and restoring that shoreline. The second part of the project is the partial removal of that parking lot asphalt and restoration of the shoreline there. But before I get into more specifics of the project, I really wanted to reinforce that the discussions we've had, both with City Council and the staff, have been very clear that the restoration proposal needs to address the residents of Gladstone and the concerns and the financial interests of the city, and to provide an overall benefit to the city. This has been our goal from the outset. We believe there is a value equation for both the city and the port on this project. By removing the bulkhead and restoring the shoreline, the city will tackle a public safety hazard, as well as protecting property and improving the overall habitat for the fish and wildlife. Addressing this problem, which has become an expensive fix based on the information we've gained to date, comes at no financial cost to the city. Based on a proposed partnership between the city and the port, we believe this offers an opportunity for both parties and sets our priorities. Now, I'm going to discuss a little bit more about the details of the proposal and the project itself, and I'm really here just to be more specific about the project, give more details of what we've learned since last June, receive City Council as well as public input on the project, and really get some direction, receive direction from the City Council on next steps, and likely request the consideration from the City Council in terms of a resolution, in terms of authorizing the development of the potential agreement at the future City Council meeting, potentially on 10/27, on October the 27th. As background, the port proposed a restoration project to city staff back in the fall of 2014 to address impacts associated with the cleanup the port had conducted at our Marine Terminal 4 within the Superfund project. The port's original restoration proposal assumed a removal of the whole parking lot at the Dull Beach and didn't include the bulkhead. But based on feedback from the City Council and staff in 2015, in early 2015, the port refined our original proposal to minimize the parking impacts to Dull Beach and include the bulkhead restoration in the proposal. In June, we came to the City Council as well as the Park and Recreation Advisory Committee to review the overall conceptual proposal we had at that time. And Council directed the City staff to work on next steps to provide more details on the conceptual restoration plans as well as optimizing the parking lot. So this one slide is here to the locations of the areas. Again, Meldrum Park. I think the pointer.
And just quickly, there are copies of this material in the back. So for those who would like to see
on the back table.
On the back.
Thank
table.
you.
On the back table. So again, here's the Willamette, the Clackamas, Meldrum Park, and the two areas are that parking lot area as well as the bulkhead. The bulkhead, again, as I mentioned, the bulkhead was added to the proposal based on the city input.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Do you not have copies?
We don't.
Okay.
I got it, I'll pass it out.
Well,
I can't see
I
it.
think there's...
yeah, no, I
We can share.
understand it.
Is this the same as what you had the other day?
Yeah,
Okay.
very much the
Well, I've
same
got a
way.
copy. Thank you. It's your turn.
That was my job.
I'm good.
No, that's okay.
Yeah. I can look at it. Well, I just want to make sure everybody out there has it first.
Yeah.
Somebody out there need some?
Very good.
Thank you, Kurt.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Mm. Yeah. So, and-
All right.
Okay, well,
Thanks, Ken.
I'll keep going then here for the sake of time. You know, it's been our understanding that the bulkhead was identified as a city priority in restoration planning meetings earlier in the year, this year. The city's interest in the restoration of the bulkhead was reinforced in subsequent meetings with city staff back in May of 2015 and again during the June 2015 City Council and Park and Recreation Advisory Committee meeting. And so, to get a little more specific in depth of what that looks like, this is a little more focused into the bulkhead area. The red hash marks are basically the footprint of the project itself. And part of the reason for that is the goal is to remove those sheet piles, the bulkhead itself, and then regrade the shoreline and those are the extent of the shoreline, as well as reestablish a slope that would be more stable, along with planting of vegetation in that area. It will require a little, some removal of the top of bank to get the appropriate slope that we feel will be stabilized based on the studies that have been conducted to date, which I'll get into a little more here. Again, as I mentioned, the bulkhead is a public safety hazard. The bulkhead bank area has steep, unstable slopes, which will continue to erode if not fixed, and could over time threaten the top of the bank area, including the parking area above the bulkhead. The restoration project at this site directly takes care of these issues. As part of the upcoming restoration plan, the Port has hired a series of technical firms to conduct the necessary studies to evaluate and develop the project, including Hart Krauser, a geotechnical firm. Hart Krauser's stability findings on the bank are that the slopes are only marginally stable, and a destabilizing event could trigger a slope failure, which could worsen the public safety hazard, including impacting the parking area above the bulkhead. So an example of what a destabilizing event that might trigger this could be as simple as something as a normal winter high flow event. Could be an example of that could trigger something. Finally, if erosion is allowed to continue on in its own, the likely outcome will be a greater impact to the area of the park and will be more costly than anticipated with the current proposed project. I'm more than happy to provide these studies, including that specific geotechnical analysis, to the city once finalized, and we would expect that in the next few weeks, for sure. So based on the cost analysis for the fix of the bulkhead, it will be expensive, and it's estimated to be 3/4 of the total construction cost of the project. The total construction cost that we've estimated to date is $460,000 without contingencies. So if you take 3/4 of that, we're about $325,000 to deal with the overall bulkhead itself. As proposed, the Port would assume all responsibility for these costs. And it's our understanding that the funding sources for this type of work is limited. The Port will also maintain and monitor the slope along with all the other project elements for at least 5 years to make sure the project is stable and the plantings are established overall for it. To move on to the second part of the project, again, this is a focused-in area of Dull Beach. The red hash mark is the impact of the actual project itself. So again, it would require the removal of that parking area. There would still be remaining parking spots in this location. And besides the removal of the asphalt, we would gently lay back the shoreline, as well as planting native vegetation and installing features like habitat, logs, etc., structures. The restoration itself would minimize city maintenance requirements of an area that floods seasonally and is potentially at risk of long-term erosion. It will also provide improved habitat for the fish and wildlife while still providing parking and recreational access for the Gladstone residents. The proposal, again, would remain parking spaces. We estimate about 8 to 10 parking spaces in that remaining area. In addition, we would do stormwater improvements as part of the project, and this would assist the city in controlling stormwater runoff to meet its stormwater management requirements under the Oregon Department of Environmental Quality. As requested by the Council in June, the Port did explore the potential to further reduce impacts to the lower parking area, but a reduced restoration area was discussed with the regulatory agencies, but it was not possible to meet their requirements without removal of the parking as proposed. The restoration itself needs a certain amount of area as well as habitat based on the impacts that occurred during the cleanup of the Terminal 4 marine facility. As with the bulkhead construction, the Port would assume all costs associated with the work, including the maintenance and monitoring of the site. And while the cost is less than the bulkhead site, the restoration potential for Dull Beach is more significant overall. So what I'll do here now is this slide is just a text and high level, if you will, of the overall proposal and what the port is obligating itself as part of the partnership here. Again, to reiterate the statements on the financial obligation, we would resume all costs associated with both of these restoration sites, including all the work associated with that. Again, we estimate the overall cost to be $460,000 without contingencies. And we would be doing all the permitting as well as doing all the maintenance and monitoring and associated costs with that. In addition to assuming these costs, the port would reimburse the city for direct costs in terms of staff time, any legal fees associated with this agreement, as well as compensation for site use. We currently estimate it at roughly $35,000. And the compensation to the city was an item discussed in June of 2015 during the session, and it's our understanding that this could be used for a parks master plan or whatever else the city council desires with that funding. Now, in terms of the city obligations, the city would provide access to the restoration site, assist us with any of the permitting requirements for the project. We would need, for example, permission from the city, and agree to keep these areas as natural habitat through a deed restriction. An example of this would be, for example, no placement of permanent structures on these two sites. That would be inconsistent with the restoration uses of it. And that would be consistent pretty much with its current layout. So I believe that the Dull Beach Restoration Project offers the city a unique opportunity to address the bulkhead and Dull Beach issues while optimizing parking spaces as much as possible for recreational access at no financial cost to the city. It provides the port with the opportunity to fill our restoration responsibilities to the regulatory agencies. In closing, we want to reinforce a couple of key points. The two restoration sites are linked. Both are necessary to match the area and the type of habitat impacts from the port's marine terminal cleanup project, and neither is really sufficient to address the regulatory requirements on its own. And while I understand the city's council's desire to have a parks master plan in place, the port has an obligation to implement a restoration project in 2016, and I believe that a master plan would identify the bulkhead as an issue to be addressed immediately, and it's our understanding, again, that the city has already identified this as a priority. So the port we're seeking is council direction on this project to eventually receive approval of an agreement, hopefully later this year. Again, I want to thank the City Council and staff for holding this public hearing on the Dull Beach Bulkhead Restoration Project. The port welcomes feedback from the Council and the public on this proposal. At the conclusion of this hearing, the port would ask, or is asking, the City Council to provide some direction on the proposal and request the Council consider a draft resolution to begin the development of an agreement to support the project at the City's next Council meeting, which I understand is October the 27th. We're happy to address any questions at this time.
Can you go back to the funding slide?
Sure.
Let's see, yeah, there. Let's see, the $35,000 on the bottom line, you said could possibly be used for parks master plans. But it says payment for city's direct costs. So is that actually a administrative fee for your project? And I don't know that a direct...
Sure.
That a master plan would be considered a direct cost on your plan.
Right. No, I mean, it's a good question, and again, for the sake of brevity, we tried to lump it up together. What that represents is two different kind of costs. One is the direct cost for your, for example, city staff or any legal fees associated with doing this work. So there would be a direct reimbursement for that. We're estimating that to be up to $15,000. Then the separate payment would be just a payment or compensation to the city in terms of the site use of $20,000 associated with that.
So this would be more of an allowance and less of a, you have to turn in time cards and
Right.
sort of stuff. Okay.
Right.
Thank you.
Where did that number come from? Where did the number of 35,000 come from?
Well, the 35,000 to break down, the 15,000 is an estimate on our part of what it might be in terms of direct city staff time or also any type of legal fees associated with that. That's an estimate, so that might be lower than that or it might be higher. And again, the port would reimburse the city for those direct costs. The $20,000 is a based estimate, if you will, on, again, receiving the feedback back in June about a master park planning. It's our understanding through talking with city staff, et cetera, that a master park planning would be roughly in the range of, and again, feedback is good on this, is roughly 80,000. And so this would be roughly 25% for that effort overall.
Why not the whole 80,000?
The part of that is that, again, coming into it, we understood the restoration to be a certain scope and size, and we are definitely willing to work with the city overall in terms of what that looks like. But the bulkhead, the actual expenses associated with the bulkhead were a lot more expensive than we had ever anticipated going into it, in terms of what's involved with the removal of that as well as stabilizing that shoreline and the plantings.
We're going to have a hearing on this in a few minutes, is that correct?
Yeah, but you can ask questions if you want.
Right. Well, just debating as to if I should ask them now or later. So, you presented this to the Parks Board, I believe, last fall. Have you returned since then?
Yeah, when we did the Parks Board, it was our understanding we did that in June 9th in 2015 as part of a joint city council and a Parks Recreation Board at that time. And it was, at that time, I believe the board was in favor of the overall project proposal.
This was
They were set right here.
They were right here.
Yeah, they were sitting
right
next to you.
Okay.
Yeah, they were sitting right there.
And I was going to ask, so was any posting done of this hearing that we're having in a few minutes down at Meldrum Bar?
No.
Okay. And I think, you mentioned about, in regards to the parking lot being cut back to comply with state storm runoff. So are we not in compliance with the state in regards to our storm runoff in that area?
I can't speak to that because I don't understand the nuances overall with the city requirements, et cetera, but it's my understanding that as part of the municipality, you do have certain stormwater requirements handed down by the state, and it's based on city staff that said that any stormwater improvements associated with the development of this project could be, lack of a better word, credit for meeting that overall stormwater requirements under the permit of the state. I don't know any more specifics than
which
that.
Which city staff?
Scotty Tabor had been at a meeting and had mentioned that whole dynamic.
This has to do with our NPDS permit, which we fill out every year, and I don't understand all I know about it, but I do know that stormwater requirements continue to be more stringent, and this allows us to meet some of those requirements without us having to put any money into it. So they're taking care of some of our requirements for the coming year when this project is done.
Okay. How close, where are we on the scale? Are we not meeting them now? Are we...
10 would be complete compliance, and 1 not compliant at all. I'm guessing we're in the 2 to 3 range, and by the way, that 10 will move next year as requirements get more and more stringent. So it's a number you're never ever in complete compliance, but
So how much of that is related to our combined sewer, sanitary and stormwater sewer? I mean, we have overflows.
yeah, we really don't know because we haven't updated the sewer master plan since, what, 81 or something
But
like
that
that.
could be affecting that as well.
It could be, but
Right.
the location of this is probably not.
So,
But
I believe I asked this back in June, so I'm going to just follow up for those that might be here that weren't there. So how is this asphalt that you're wanting to remove affecting the storm runoff, or how's it, or the fish habitat to that area?
Right. I mean, one example of that would be just the oil and grease associated with vehicles moving up and down on the asphalt itself, and then obviously as it gets inundated or flooded with the water, that's obviously having a potential impact in terms of stormwater and stormwater runoff controls, et cetera.
Would blocking off Meldrum Bar afford the same result when we don't have preventing people driving out in old vehicles that leak oil and gas?
So, you mean blocking off access to the actual parking area?
No, he
No.
is being,
More than
and he's
put out
adding,
on-
Oh,
he's just
right,
adding
right,
this
right.
other
Okay.
equation
Yeah.
into it.
Yeah, okay, in that area.
Yeah, we talked about that when we met. I mean, that Meldrum Bar, I mean, you've got automobiles out on the Rock Beach and all the way out to the bar. I mean, how is that affecting, I mean, that's runoff, and you've got automotive oil products into the river.
Right.
That's probably the next step is
Yeah.
that we close it, is that we close that as well, I guess.
Yeah, but I mean, if we close that, why would we need to tear a parking lot out? I mean, don't we have a balance there somewhere?
Yeah, we do both.
Well, do we need to do both?
Well, I think we're kind of, this is just dealing with these two projects. If we could just stay on that topic. we'd
Well, I
be
think
good.
they're related, just like the parking lot is related to the bulkhead.
Yeah.
I mean, this is the bulkhead's just upstream from the bar.
So you want them to come in and close Meldrum too at the same time, do all three?
Well,
I'm just asking.
well, that's what I'm asking. I'm not telling or suggesting. I'm asking.
Is an alternative to tearing out the parking lot.
I think that the way to look at this as well, in terms of why the proposal of tearing out part of the parking lot, is that, again, from a regulatory agency that monitors the fish and the habitat, et cetera, the salmon, the overall asphalt and large riprap, et cetera, isn't necessarily natural habitat for the fish. So any kind of improvements associated with that, they deem that as a positive, and so that's part of this. It's not just the fact that cars are going on the asphalt, there's oil that could be leaked and then that are, in detriment in terms of the water quality. It's also just having improved habitat for the fish. And again, as a result of the project, we will be looking at some stormwater improvements that would also assist you in other areas of need, such as your NPDES requirements. It's an added feature, added bonus associated with the restoration that the city can also, again, have an opportunity to capitalize
But
on.
in restoration for salmon, we're already working on a related project that is also for restoration of the salmon. I mean, do we need to make this back into a natural river, or? I mean, it's been dredged. It's an industrial river. Are we going to rebuild it to pristine standards from one end to the other? I mean, what level do we need to work at this? We've already got a salmon rest area we're working on. Do they need another salmon rest area too? And where does it stop?
Okay.
So
I don't know, it was in the form of a question. Yes, Kim?
I met with them last week, I believe, and we went down and walked the sites. And there was an observation made, I believe, by all three of us when we was in the parking lot. The majority, and this was before noon on a weekday, the majority of the people that were using that parking lot had handicap plates, handicap stickers hanging from their mirrors, I'm having some real heartburn with the removal of the parking spaces. We talked to one gentleman down there, and they pull up there to the edge of the asphalt, and they cast out and fish right from their vehicle. They're not capable of getting down closer to the water, and we're going to remove the parking lot and take that away from them. And that's just something that I had talked to them about it before, but then when we actually got down there, we seen that.
How many cars were there?
I would say there was probably, I know there was one and probably two when we pulled in, and there was probably in the half hour, 45 minutes we were there, probably 4 or 5 others pulled through. Is that reasonable numbers?
I've been there before when it's a pretty full parking lot.
Well, any other questions?
So you have to do this because it's mitigation for some Superfund site stuff, so there must be a monetary amount that's your upper limit. What is that? Or is there something you were looking for monetarily? So is there a penalty that you were trying to get, penalty amount or something that this is pushing against?
Right. Well, in terms of the monetary, ultimately we have an obligation that we have to meet in terms of the project itself, and that will have monetary value associated with that. And to be honest, we're reaching that in terms of potentially other alternatives in terms of restoration sites that we've looked similar to in terms of scope, et cetera.
No, I talk about the acreage requirements, the area and kind. Like
right. Yeah. I mean, in terms, it's not necessarily in financial. It's mostly, as Lisa had pointed out, area. There's a certain area requirements and certain kind of habitat features that's part of the overall requirements.
And we've done, Kelly has met with the regulatory agencies because we can't just go out and propose anything. They have to concur with whatever we propose. And as we said, we initially we came out and looked at Doll Beach, heard the feedback about the parking spots, and kind of reviewed how we could do something slightly different, and that was with the Doll Beach proposal. This is an opportunity that we're sharing with you, and we love partnership. We think it does meet some of your needs, as well as addressing our mitigation requirements, and we just would love to hear if you feel like it does as well. So,
can you go back to the screen with the parking lot of how much you're proposing to remove?
Well, aren't you leaving 8 to 10 spots?
Yes. Yeah.
Just on my own note, because I've been going down there since June, the last hearing, and I've been down there no less than 14 times, trying to vary the times of days between 9 o'clock in the morning till 5 in the afternoon, and most I've ever seen in that parking lot is 4 cars, and on the average, probably about 2. And that's, again, varying times, varying days, so that's just my own observation. Any other questions? All right.
Your Honor,
Yes, sir.
may I suggest we hold the public hearing right now as opposed to waiting until Reinerson's Pond has been presented, just because it's fresh in everybody's mind?
Everybody okay with that, to tack it on?
Yeah, I don't have
Move item number 4A from the regular agenda up to abut the presentation. So thank you, and at this time we'll give everybody a chance to come up and speak. If you want to speak on this topic, you've kind of heard the nuts and bolts, and if you want to approach, we're not going to fill out cards because we moved it up too fast. So if you come up to the table here and just say your name and address, please, and then 3 minutes for you to speak your piece. Thank you.
Kirk Semple, my address is on file. I want to address the Meldrum Bar thing really quick. I do belong to the Clackamas Water Rescue Consortium. I would love to see that closed because I've pulled quite a few bodies out of there. This has come up numerous times in our meetings. the Oregon State Marine Board does not want to do that. And a comment was made to me is, if you want to see people pissed off, try and close it. There's a lot of fishermen that use that, and you shut that down, you guys are in for one big ugly mess. Just wanted to say that. Thanks.
Thank you.
I got a sneaky feeling approving this also.
No, not as much.
Well, maybe not as much, but...
Hello, Tammy Stemple, 6960 Winfield Court. I was a part of the original group that brought the stakeholders together for this. Originally, Cascade Environmental approached the city of Gladstone and said, we have to take that parking lot, and our previous administration was ready to sign on the dotted line. When the new mayor came on board, we thought it was a great opportunity to look at this again and see if there was something that we could get out of this that we wanted. And so we met, we talked to Cascade, Port of Portland got involved, and we came up with a deal that I think is a win-win for everybody. We're getting a project that needs to be done that we would never be able to afford. And we're giving up a little bit that really needs to be done also. The parking lot, you say, is ADA. That's great. I'm glad that you guys feel that way, but once you start throwing the ADA tag out there, we would have to do so many improvements, and we never could, because under new environmental regulations, it would never get permitted. So I would take that off the table, because that's just a whole other can of worms. The parking lot is eroding as it is. There's no stormwater buffer for any runoff going into the river. It goes straight into the river, which is not in compliance in any way, shape, or form. Just south of that parking lot is eroding very, very quickly, and we have to do something to stop it. Where the bulkhead is, the U.S. Army Corps identified that years ago as a project that had to be done because it was a public safety issue. We decided to ignore it. Well, we're not going to be able to ignore it anymore, and these people have stepped up to the plate and said, we will take care of that for you. We're losing the parking lot up above. The erosion downstream from that bulkhead is eroding faster than the other parking lot. So these are issues that have to be done. This is a good deal for the city. It is. And I understand that we don't want to lose the parking lot, we don't want to lose the access, but we're not losing the whole parking lot. It's a balance of what are we going to gain and what are we going to lose. And my take, we are going to gain tremendous amount of benefit from this project.
What parking lot down below is eroding?
The one right behind the bulkhead. Oh, the down below where we're going to be...
You just talked about...
The parking lot where you guys are talking about that's ADA accessible. When you go to the south end of the parking lot, it's starting to erode and it's starting to sink. And the area to the bank just south of it is eroding very, very quickly. So once we start making changes down there, we will never be able to do it. And by being proactive and doing these changes, it'll take this project off the table, and I don't think then U.S. Army Corps is going to come before us and say, hey, remove the rest of the parking lot because it's not in compliance. Here we're showing them that we've done a good faith effort to do what needs to be done, the right thing, and taking care of these projects at no cost to us. And at this point in our city history, that is important. And not only is it no cost to us, but we have a project management team that does this day in and day out, and they're going to do it right. We aren't going to have to worry about mitigation credits like the other project that we have, because this one is paid for and funded by the port. We don't have the middleman that's sitting there trying to negotiate deals. It's direct, it's clean, simple. It is a great project. That was it.
Thank you.
For clarification,
Thank you, Tammy.
I've never claimed the parking lot was an ADA fishing spot. It just tends to get used by a lot of elderly and handicapped, so.
Anyone else want to speak on this topic? The mic is open. No one at this time? Any further discussion by y'all? What? Yes, sir.
No, I was going to make a motion. If you
Need to make a
so
motion?
If you so desire.
Your Honor,
We don't have a resolution
you
on...
close a public hearing
Well,
or
that's,
leave it open?
my motion is to continue the hearing until next month.
The next,
Or,
October...
I'm sorry, until our next meeting.
10/27
Yeah.
is another public hearing. Now, can we tack on at that point? Will that include a resolution possibility, or does that get
No,
done at that time?
absolutely, you can have the resolution before you at that time, after the meeting, of course.
Okay.
I would like to see some sort of noticing in the parks in the area that we're talking about, to allow park users to at least have an idea that we're going to discuss this, so they can come, they can hear what's happening.
I agree with that.
I'm good.
Okay. So we're good. We're going to close the public hearing. Yes, sir.
I made a motion to continue the public hearing until our next meeting. So, but,
I'll
no
second
second?
that.
Okay.
Okay. So, motion was made by Councilor Reisner to continue the public hearing till October 27th, correct? And was seconded by Councilor Sickman. Any discussion on that? All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Okay.
And I concur.
And the public hearing is now closed on the Dull Beach Bulkhead.
No,
and
no, 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 no.
continue-
It's open.
It's continued.
All
It's
right, I'm
continued.
sorry, it is continued to October 27th.
And I concur with Councilor Sigmund in getting notice down around the area.
Okay. Thank you. Okay, moving down to the next presentation, which is Reinerson Pond, Bobby Prout. No attachments here. Please approach.
Thank you.
We've set you up and warmed up now, Bobby.
Thank you. Thank you for your time this evening. Again, my name is Bobby Prout. Work for a company called Falling Springs. Purpose of the presentation tonight is to provide a quick background of the project for those that are new to the project. It's to provide a background of my company, give a general current status of the project, and talk about next steps for it. So I know that many of you are familiar with the project, so I won't go into too much detail, but if there are questions at any time, feel free to interrupt me. I'm happy to have more of a discussion than a presentation here. As you likely know, this is an ecological restoration project located nearby, near the Meldrum Park area. It's comprised of property owned by the city, by the Robinwood Riviera Homeowners Association, and by an individual landowner as well. As part of the project, we're going to be restoring, enhancing, and eventually preserving wetlands adjacent to the Willamette River. We'll be removing an earthen dam. We'll be filling some auxiliary channels. We'll be excavating an historic channel. We'll be raising a downstream stream bed, performing some grading work, removing and controlling invasive plant species, installing large woody debris, and planting native vegetation. This restoration work will produce credits. Those credits can be purchased from parties who have liability associated with the Portland Harbor Superfund site. This project has a long history, as many of you all know. It certainly predates my involvement. John Runyon, who was presented to you before, initially got involved in this project at least 7 years ago. He was called in to look at some water quality issues as well as some fish entrapment issues in the area. He saw a need to fix it, and so he tried to identify a way to fix that problem, and he quickly looked to the Portland Harbor Superfund site as a way to do that. John negotiated the existing agreement that's in place with the city in 2014. We became involved and purchased the project in 2014, sort of shortly after that agreement was signed. We helped negotiate and finalize the other two agreements that are currently in place. We got involved. We like this project. We think it's a good project. That's why we purchased it. I think we're also a good funding source for the project going forward, which I can touch on in a moment. John and his company, Cascade Environmental Group, have remained on. They lead the permitting and entitlement efforts, and they oversee the project design. So Falling Springs, we're the project developer, much like any other sort of real estate project developer. We're responsible for pushing the project through and for getting it approved. We also finance all the costs associated with the project, so entitlement costs, design costs, permitting costs, etc. We do that with our own equity. There's no debt on this project. It all comes from our company's coffers. So then who is Falling Springs? We're an ecological restoration company. We've been in business for about 7 or 8 years now. We're headquartered in Richmond, Virginia, but we do have projects throughout the country. We have currently 19 projects.
Most of them are centered in Virginia, but we have projects in Florida, we have projects in California, Georgia, and 2 in Oregon. We're currently working on another project in Oregon up in Clatsop County in Astoria, which is a 200-acre salmon habitat restoration project as well. We just finished phase 1 of construction. We'll complete construction next year. So we are familiar with this area, and I personally enjoy the area a lot and have enjoyed getting out here. We've done numerous wetland restoration projects, numerous stream restoration projects, numerous habitat restoration projects. Salmon habitat restoration project, as I mentioned, we have undergoing right now up in Clatsop. So let's review the current project status. We can really break this into three categories. We can look at design, we can look at permitting, and then we can look at project approval. With the design, we're at 50%. 50% is a good number. For those that are familiar with sort of design steps, 50% gives you the basic, the good layout. We're going to get to 100% design before we begin construction. This isn't a design build. You know, in the project I have up in Clatsop, we got to 60% and then we went through to construction. Here we're going to go to 100% design before we construct. That process to take from 50% to 100 will begin in the winter and then finish in the spring. But, so we're all clear, the 50% design gives everybody the idea of the way the project's going to be constructed, and so from our permitting standpoint, all of those design approval packages have been submitted and we can move forward on that front. On the permitting front, we've submitted all of our federal and state permits. They've been received and deemed complete. We're awaiting response. We don't expect any big issues out of that. Certainly timing is always the issue in that process. On the approval side, we have we've made our last submittal to the trustee council. For those that are unfamiliar with the Portland Harbor Superfund site, the cleanup is overseen by a trustee council made up of 10 regulatory agencies and tribes. And not only are they responsible for assessing and determining liability at the harbor site, they're also responsible for approving projects. And so we recently made our last submittal to them. We had a meeting today with members of the trustee council. We had initially hoped to have their approval by November 1st. I think that's unrealistic at this point based on that meeting today. Delays are always unfortunate, but they're not out of what we expect. Again, we do this enough. We understand that there may be delays, and so from our standpoint, it doesn't throw us off any big path that we're already on. So we're through most of the process. What do we have outstanding right now? I think the biggest issue that we have outstanding is submission of our county land use application. I think it's a floodplain development permit. And we've been holding off on that permit for an issue that I think you've been briefed on before. But just to give some background, part of what we're doing at this project is we are displacing a lot of soil, particularly sediment. Some of the sediment can be spread out on the site, the project site. Some of that sediment is just going to be excess and it's going to have to be removed. And so we had gone through the analysis of the sediment that we were going to have to remove. And initially the Corps had determined that some of that sediment had to be removed because it was unfit for aquatic life. Now again, be clear about this, never did they say it was unfit for health and human safety, but they said it was unfit for aquatic life. So John Runyon had presented to you, I think back in May, and made that statement, which rightfully raised some questions from council about, okay, well, tell me what impact that sediment would have to humans. So we've continued to run that analysis. What has also happened in that time is the Corps has reevaluated that sediment, all of that sediment. And the Corps has now determined that all of that sediment can, in fact, remain on site, which is good news. So that impacts what we need to then do in terms of where we're taking the excess. Because John had proposed, John has discussed, we have proposed taking the excess and placing it along the 2 fields at Meldrum Bar Park, right as you come down the access road. We can now take only the clean sediment, the clean excess, and place it up there, whereas before we were forced to remove some of the sediment that had slight levels of contamination. So that is welcome news, and I think that's a very helpful step. Now, we also acknowledge that this issue has raised some question, and so what we've also decided to do is ask the Department of Environmental Quality to issue a letter or analysis of concurrence that says there is no health or human safety issue with putting any of that sediment up in those fields. And we think on both those paths we have now addressed any potential health and human safety issues that could be faced by putting those sediments up on those fields. There's also another issue with those fields. Those fields are within a cultural resource area, and as I understand it, when the natural gas pipeline was, or the pipeline project was undergone, they did hit some resources. And when we heard that, we decided to investigate further with SHPO, State Historic Preservation Office. SHPO came back to us today, and the questions we were asking them was, look, can we put those sediments there? Will you even allow us to do it? And if you will, are we going to have to take any special measures when we're putting the soil? And SHPO came back today and said, yes, you are allowed to, and no, you don't have to take any extra measures over there. So that, again, is a positive note in terms of our access. I understand that we're just presenting this follow-up information based on May. It's our intention to include all of this information with the application packet when we submit and give everybody an opportunity to review the background of what I'm telling you. So not asking for any sort of formal decision on this tonight, obviously, but did want to update you with what we feel is pretty good news on that front. Where do we go? So where are we going forward? As I mentioned, we need to work with the trustee council to get the project approved. We need to work through the land use, the county process as well. What are the risks right now? Well, one of the risks is we can't get the trustees to approve our project. Do I think that's a substantive risk? No. Am I overly concerned about it? No. But we all have to recognize that that is a risk. And we need to make sure that we're addressing their issues in a timely fashion so we can get through the approval process. But let's say the very unlikely event occurs and we couldn't do that. What's the impact of that? Well, the impact of that is that we wouldn't move forward with the project and the restoration work wouldn't occur. But again, we've spent a lot of money to date on that, so you can imagine that would be a pretty catastrophic event for us and not one that we would ever move forward with lightly. What are the other risks to the project? I think as John had mentioned last time he spoke with you, the market for credits has not materialized the way I think he envisioned it. That's to be expected. You know, we've done enough of these projects that we see that these credit markets take longer than anybody ever wants or thinks or hopes. And so that's, while it's unfortunate and we'd like to see those credit markets develop more quickly, we're accustomed to that. We can deal with it. It's not a catastrophic event for us. So has it delayed construction? Yes. We had considered constructing this year. Now, we didn't have the necessary approvals to anyway, but it did. That was a factor in us deciding to push pause on construction for this year. If the credit market was terrible next year, would we consider delaying? Maybe. That's really speculation at this point. I assume I have that ability. We're ready to move forward with construction. You know, not constructing doesn't really help us. It just sort of helps us reduce or minimize how much we're spending, but it doesn't help us achieve our goal, which is to build the project successfully, generate the credits, and then sell them to parties that need it. So we really are pushing very hard this winter to get our project approved so that we can begin construction and we can begin selling these credits. What risk do I see to the city at this point? This arrangement with all of our land partners has really been about our land partners contributing the land and allowing us to move forward with our development. So we're not here asking for any money. We're well funded and we'll be able to fund this through construction without ever having a single credit transaction occur. So I don't really see any financial risk to the city through this project right now. If, again, let's just talk in ifs for a second, completely speculative, if for some reason we stopped midway through construction, we're contractually obligated to return the site to its current form. We're also going to be required to put up a performance bond. So there will be, our project will be bonded by the will be required to be bonded by the trustees. So the city has some assurances there that the work will get done and there are assurances behind it to make sure it gets done. I think that's it for the moment. This is not going to be a particularly difficult construction project. It's about a 30-day project, and so we think we can get through it pretty quickly.
So worst case scenario, you get all the way through the project, you spend millions of dollars on it, and there are no credits, and you take a loss on it.
Yes.
What happens to the city of Gladstone in that case?
All right, so what happens to the city of Gladstone? At that point, I've built a project. These credits that I've gotten just no market's there.
Never there.
And they say the harbor is now clean and nobody has any liability. Okay. In that case, you would have a site that's restored. You would not have the long-term management funds in place necessarily because those are generated by credits. So I think that would be your issue, which means the project itself wouldn't necessarily have the funds to be maintained long-term. Now, there would be no liability associated with maintaining it long-term because no credits are sold. So the city would have no liability to maintain it to the trustees. It would just have its general liability as property that it owns as a public park.
So there's not an expected liability to the city in that case to make your company whole?
No. I don't. You're not mitigation market folks. There's no way I could ever expect you to say that this project is going to be successful. There's no way I can say this project is going to be successful. That's why we're in the business we are, because we think we can make them successful.
Okay.
We think we have the skills that it takes to bring these things forward.
The quality of the dirt that you're talking about pulling out and need to put somewhere else, not contaminated or not to a level of contamination. Do we have issues with appearance or odor or anything like that? If you start spreading it out, are we going to get complaints about odor from the nearby folks in the trailer park?
No, I don't think you will. In the renderings that I've seen that John had prepared for me, what we're actually proposing to do is to flatten that site, make it a little bit more usable field. From what I understand in some discussions with Scott, this field is fairly lumpy right now, difficult to use, difficult to maintain. We're talking about flattening those out. We're also talking about putting some vegetation, some plantings along the side of that park, so improve the view shed. I don't think there would be, and then obviously replant with vegetation, so it's not going to remain a dirt pile or a mud pile. It would be revegetated.
So if it is not contaminated soil, if there's not a mitigation problem there, does the soil have any commercial value? I mean, could you sell it and come and get it, haul it off, and, get rid of it that way?
I don't think so. I don't think, given the nature of the sediment, it's not really compressible soil.
Okay.
And so I don't see a commercial value to it.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
Regarding the cultural resource fields,
Yes.
what state agency?
So it's SHPA, the State Historic Preservation Organization? Office. There we go. Sorry.
Yeah.
Okay. Interesting. Why it caught that's what you just said caught me off guard, because a couple of years ago we were told different by a neighboring city in regards to that.
I think it surprised us a little bit when they hit the resources, when the company found those resources, and so it was just out of an abundance of caution that we went back and said, okay, what do we need to do here, if anything? Because what we don't want to do is move forward and then have a cultural resource issue come up and have to react to it. So we think we took the proactive approach here.
Oh, thank you.
You said that 50% of the engineering was now complete, approximately. And you won't do construction until 100% is complete. Before that you solve any of the credits, are you going to continue with the engineering?
Engineering is continuing, yes.
Okay. And when do you believe that's going to be complete?
All the design and engineering should be complete this spring.
Okay.
Yes.
A couple of things. That's really great news to hear about the sediment that needs to be removed.
Thank you.
Do you have any other contingency plan for hauling that? One of the reasons that I ask is I've seen it happen a couple of times here where somebody brings in fill to fill in all these low spots. It's not an engineered fill, and 5 years down the road they've decided, oh, we're going to build something here.
Right.
Now all that fill needs to be removed and hauled off someplace else to bring in engineered fill. And that kind of concerns me. Without having our Parks Master Plan, I'm sure you was here for that earlier, it does kind of hinder us, and I don't know what the uses for that area could be a year from now when we have a master plan. That may be a great place to put all that and level it all off. But I'd hate to have to, go ahead and put it there, and then now we have to pay to haul it all off again.
Sure.
So is there any other contingency plan for that?
Well,
and how much are you, and let me restate that. Is there any other contingency plan for that, and do you have an idea? Is this a half-inch layer across that field? Is it 3 feet? How much do you think is going to be there?
There's a geotech report that I can give you that'll give you more detail on it. We'll include that in the application. I don't know that numbers offhand. We did have a geotech report done, so we feel good about how they would be. It's a good point you raise about what you're thinking for the future. I think it's always been our assumption that those fields would remain as fields. And again, let us look at more at the technical basis of what that soil could be used for and whether there would be risk to you that you would have to remove it if you decided you wanted to build structures up there.
When would it be moved, do you think? That would be next year then, wouldn't it?
Yeah, so if let's say we began construction in May, it would be moved in May.
Oh, okay.
For clarification, which field are you referring to?
Okay, so
I believe we've been talking about the field that is south of the main driveway into the park that abuts the Gladstone Mobile Home Park.
Correct.
That's what we talked about today.
Okay.
The upper bluff.
Okay, that's what I thought, but when you mentioned fields, I'm thinking maybe he's talking about ball fields.
No, and because of the
Okay. Because that's just a vacant field up there.
the cultural historical site that he's talking about is at Jensen Road and right up there where the Coluccio parks some equipment off of the trail, and that's where this thing came up. They came across a campfire or something.
And this is pretty much just across the road from there.
So
Yeah, it's from that Jensen Road to the Meldrum Bar Park entrance road.
This newfound discovery that the soil's okay to be spread.
yes.
Before that, there was a discussion to have to haul that stuff away. So the question is, come May, when you're ready to spread it out, how much do you save by just spreading it out there and having to haul it away? So the second part of the question is, what's in it for us?
Sure. So the estimates I've heard is it's a six-figure number. It's 100 to 200,000. Maybe it's 220, but that's a little bit of offhand in the brain. So I want to caution you, but I think it's that low six-figure. What's in it for the city? Remember, we have this arrangement where the city, again, let's talk about how the money flows. When we sell credits, money comes back in to pay for project costs. Once those project costs are paid, then we're 50-50 partners in what's left over. So if we spend more money up front, there's less to share on the back. So if that $200,000 cost isn't there, then there is $200,000 at the back to share.
So we're, in this whole scheme of things, at some point at the end, when you sell credits off, we're 50% partners in the take of it. Okay. All right.
Yeah, there's a flow of, fund costs are paid first, and then once you hit those costs, then eventually we become 50-50. I think it's pretty well spelled out in our agreement.
Okay.
Yeah, the recognition, I think Bobby, would acknowledge this is just what they're going to take credits they sell, the revenue from that to pay off project costs. So you're looking at then what we would, in the business world, call profit, really. I mean, so there's no, that gets back to the how soft is the DSA market, what other costs are they going to incur as they go through this project. But yes, absolutely, structurally, that's how the deal is made.
And our original investment into this is considered project costs and will come back in the beginning also.
Yes, sir.
Okay. And you have done nothing but engineering at this point? I know there's been things done in the park, a trail and some fence and viewing areas, but that wasn't any part of what...
Some invasive management. We had some goats go out to the site and eat up blackberries. That's really a first step in the invasive. It's a fairly rigorous process. We've had, yes, the engineering work. The permitting work is a very significant cost, too. There's a lot to that, so I don't want to underestimate that cost. The costs have been significant already.
We good?
Yep.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you for your time.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, those are the two presentations. Moving down to the consent agenda, 4 items on the consent agenda. Approval of minutes, September 22nd, 2015 meeting, approval of change of ownership of LCC liquor license, KB Teriyaki Grill, and approval of project list, and approval of payment of September claims.
I'd like to ask to have number 1, approval of minutes removed for discussion.
All right, anything else?
I'd like to make a motion that we approve consent agenda items 2, 3, and 4.
I second that.
Okay, motion is made to approve the consent agenda items 2, 3, and 4 by Councilor McMahon, seconded by Councilor Mercereau. Any discussion? Okay, all in favor of those 3 consent items being approved, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Okay, items 2, 3, and 4 consent agenda are approved. Item number 1 on the consent agenda, approval of minutes, September 22nd. Kim, Mr. Sickman, you wanted to have a discussion.
Yeah, I just wanted to, on page 1-4, under business from the council, I requested to become the liaison for the council liaison for the transportation system plan, and that's exactly what it says. But I think it should go on a little further because I believe, Mr. Mayor, you appointed me and the council approved that. I think that should be on the record.
1-4. Okay, so what's the verbiage then after that?
Mayor appointed and council confirmed.
Mayor appointed Councilor Sickman as liaison to the transportation system plan.
Confirmed by council. Approved. I'm pretty flexible with it.
I'm sorry, I'm writing this. Oh, transportation system planning, is it a committee or is it just the planning? Just the council, liaison transportation system planning, how's that? And was approved by council. Everybody good with that?
Sure.
Yes?
I have an edit already as well.
That's done.
I have another edit to the minutes.
Okay, to that one.
No, different issue. Page 1-1, the roll call, like it noted that my late arrival was related to my attendance at the North Clackamas Water Providers meeting. Page 1-1, very top.
You don't want to just be shown as tardy every quarter? I know it's a conflicting meeting for you.
It's important to go.
Yes, and thank you for doing it.
I concur.
Give me the water.
The North Clackamas, I have to look it up myself, North Clackamas Water Providers meeting. I sit as the board member from Gladstone at that meeting.
All right, any other edits on that particular item?
Make a motion to approve.
Second.
Okay, motion was made to approve the consent agenda item number 1 with the amendments made, the 2 amendments that were made, and it was seconded by Councilor Johnson. All in favor, discussion. Okay, all in favor of approval of that particular agenda item with the amendments, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Okay, item number 1 of the consent agenda item is approved. Down correspondence, we don't have any this month. Down to the regular agenda item, we already done 4-A, which is Dole Beach. Moving down to number 5, ordinance number 1459, which is amending Title 17 of the Gladstone Municipal Code to repeal Chapter 17.61 and adopt a new Chapter 17.61 wireless communication facilities.
Thank you, Mayor and Council. You, as the Mayor noted, had a hearing on this at your last meeting in September. I guess it would have been your first meeting in September. In any event, meeting in September. And had just 2 changes that were requested. You had the hearing, you closed the hearing, so tonight really at this point, unless you wanted to reopen the hearing, which is your call, your, I guess, task is to have any further discussion you want to have. If there's further questions, certainly can do my best to try to answer those. But I did want to just very briefly walk you through what was changed, and this is entirely consistent with what we discussed that meeting. On page 5-3 of the packet, the second page of the ordinance, its definition, residential building, number 16 there at the bottom. It now reads in 16 sub A, residential building includes a mixed-use building. It used to exclude it. And then we amended or tweaked the definition on, this is on page 5-4, I'm at the middle of the page. Subsection 21A now reads, the mounting of a proposed antenna on a support tower would increase the existing height of the support tower by more than 10%. That used to have a 20-foot either-or threshold, and we eliminated that. I confirmed with my colleagues that would not be an issue. Beyond that, it's exactly what you saw in September. And so, unless there are questions, I would recommend that the council at least entertain the first reading of the ordinance tonight. Thank you.
Acting City Recorder, will you read the ordinance number 1459 by title for the first reading, please?
Ordinance 1459, an ordinance amending Title 17 of the Gladstone Municipal Court to repeal Chapter 17.61 and adopt a new Chapter 17.61.
Any other staff or reports or related items to this?
No, sir.
Any questions from the council at this time? No further discussion then. If we're not, then I want to entertain a motion to approve the first reading of ordinance number 1459.
So moved. I'll second that.
Motion was made by Councilor Johnson, was seconded by Councilor McMahon. No further discussion was necessary, so we're going to do a roll call vote on the first reading, please.
Councilor Siegman?
Yes.
Councilor Mishro?
Yes.
Councilor Johnson?
Yes.
Absent Councilor Turner? Councilor McMahon?
Yes.
Councilor Reisner?
Yes.
Mayor Jacobellis?
Yes. Okay, are we going to move this to a second?
We could have a second.
We can have a second reading now.
We had unanimous, we can go to second, I think,
Okay.
can't we?
All right.
Yeah.
So, Acting City Recorder, or whatever you want to call your title, please read the ordinance again, 1459, by title for the second reading, please.
Ordinance 1459, an ordinance amending Title 17 of the Gladstone Municipal Code to repeal Chapter 17.61 and adopt a new Chapter 17.61.
Any updates or changes by the staff?
No, Your Honor.
No, Mayor.
Any council additional questions for anyone or regarding this item? Okay, no further discussion. I will entertain a motion to approve the second reading of the ordinance.
So moved.
I'll second it.
Okay, the motion was made by Councilor Johnson, seconded by Councilor McMahon. Let's do roll call vote, please, again, for the second reading.
Councilor Seekman,
Yes.
Councilor Mercero,
Yes.
Councilor Johnson,
Yes.
absent Councilor Turner, Councilor McMahon,
Yes.
Councilor Reisner,
Yes.
and Mayor Jacob Ellis.
Yes. Second reading of ordinance number 1459 is approved and ordinance is adopted. Okay, item number 6. This is a public hearing on ordinance number 1463 and the recommendation from the Planning Commission. Well, I won't read the rest of it, but that's file number Z0347-15-CP, approval of stormwater system and water system master plans, Exhibit A and B, attached separately. And assuming we're going to have Clay present them.
We certainly are. City planner is going to come up and have a seat.
Hi,
Hello.
Good evening.
I'm Clay Glasgow. I work with Clackamas County and provide planning services to Gladstone on contract. About 2 years ago, maybe a little less than that, City Council commissioned Brown and Caldwell to produce a water master plan and a stormwater master plan for the city. That has happened. We are now into the hearings process. This will be done as a comprehensive plan amendment, a text amendment. We are proposing that it be included by reference into the plan in its entirety. The process involved through your land use documents include a minimum of 2 public hearings, one before the Planning Commission, which has been held. That was held in September of this year. I can get a date. The Planning Commission reviewed the documents, staff report, and arrived at a recommendation to forward on to you folks. That recommendation was for approval. This will be the second public hearing on this item, and it is the council, you folks, who actually make the decision on this. Hopefully you got copies of these documents. They're large, and I know that Jolene and Tammy were having trouble passing them out and getting them around. For those of you in the back, we've got the Gladstone Stormwater Master Plan proposed and the Gladstone Water Master Plan proposed. The city has been operating, well, let me back up a little bit. The city handles both its own water system and stormwater system. Sewer is done by others, but you guys do your own water and stormwater. The original water system master plan was done back in 1980. Since then, there's been significant changes, including you're getting your water from a different place, as well as population growth and other changes. You've never had a stormwater master plan, and how Public Works has dealt with this is just a mystery to me. Generally speaking, when there's been some kind of mini disaster with stormwater, it's dealt with at that level. There's just been no information, no detail on where the pipes are, where they go, how big they are, that kind of thing. The consultants put together really a great deal of information on both. Particularly the stormwater master plan has really good detail on every single manhole cover, every single manhole, every drain, where the pipes go, how big they are, that kind of thing. This is the kind of information you've needed always, you now have. It's been digitized, and because of that, it can be used in many different ways for many different purposes. From my standpoint, just as a land use planner, this is information we need when we're looking at just your basic application that comes through the door for a new house or new store. Same thing with a water master plan. Again, your original one was done in 1980. It was fine. It's just there's been a lot of changes made since then. The information contained within this is, again, along with the stormwater plan, is going to be a boon to your public works people, and is also going to help ensure better development, better plan development. I'm sorry, my voice is actually much better than it was earlier today, but it's still a little small. Hopefully you all had a chance to read the staff report. As this is a comprehensive plan amendment, it needs to be compared against both the statewide planning goals and Metro's functional plan. If you did read it, you'll notice that a lot of it simply isn't applicable to those specific goals and titles out of Metro's plan. That said, and from a planning standpoint, it falls nicely into the really good idea category, just to have this kind of information collected. Gladstone, frankly, is one of maybe the only city in the urban area that didn't have a stormwater master plan, and certainly our water master plan had become out of date. But I went through all the necessary findings and found that it either was complied with or was not applicable against the statewide planning goals and Metro's functional plan. Easily came to the conclusion that this was approvable. As I say, it went for the Planning Commission last month. It was duly advertised in newspapers, etc. There was no one in attendance at that hearing, no one from the public, so we received no testimony. I don't know if we'll get any this evening. But at this point, I'm just here to recommend you follow the recommendation of the Planning Commission and accept these as your master plans for your water system and your stormwater system. Have any questions?
No questions?
I just wanted to make a comment, and I guess my understanding is that we will be approving the master plan, but not approving how much we're going to spend and or what the rates will actually be. Those are only recommended by a certain option or two within the plan, but we're not approving how much the ratepayers are going to have to pay.
That is a correct assumption. How's that? The consultants were juggling numbers and lengths of pipe and that kind of thing, but these are like 100,000-foot level plans. They are master plans. They're to help guide future development and to help you figure out how to fix stuff when it breaks. As far as what it costs you and me as ratepayers, that's down the road. That's for something later. What they did is they prioritized some projects in here and put some ballpark estimates on costs, but it's just a list of what they think is most important, and those costs are very ballpark and subject to change, and that's what you folks are here for when you get into the specifics.
Thank you.
Any other questions for Clay? No. Thank you, sir. And as this is a public hearing, anyone else like to speak on this topic, please approach and state your name and address if you haven't already filled out a card.
Malachi Delfold. I'm just here to clarify one comment you just regarding what you just said, Tom. So the Planning Commission was actually directed to not look at the projects that are listed as projects we are actually going to do, but more as just informational research material, basically. They're not actually, a list of projects to start working through. So I just wanted to make sure that was clear.
Thank you. Anyone else want to speak on this topic? All right. Well, I am, at this time, going to close the public hearing. And now, I will entertain or direct the city recorder to read the ordinance by title for the first reading, ordinance number 1463.
Ordinance number 1463, an ordinance adopting a stormwater master plan and water master plan as support documents to the Gladstone Comprehensive Plan.
And do you, staff, have any comments on this? Or?
No, I think, I would just say, at the end of the day, state law imposes on every city an obligation to have something like a master plan. I think virtually everybody I've worked with calls it as such. So this is, especially as Clay said, with respect to stormwater, bringing you, up to speed in terms of what the state would expect of you. I would encourage the council to adopt it.
Okay, thank you. Any questions from the council for staff and/or just a discussion? Okay, no further discussion. I'll entertain a motion to approve the first reading of ordinance number 1463.
I'll
Motion.
make that motion.
Second?
Okay, the motion was made by Councilor McMahon and seconded by Councilor Sickman. Acting City Recorder, will you please do a roll call vote on the first reading?
Councilor Sigmund,
Yes.
Councilor Mercer,
Yes.
Councilor Johnson,
Yes.
absent Councilor Turner, Councilor McMahon,
Yes.
Councilor Reisner,
Yes.
and Mayor Jacobellis.
Yes. Okay, since we had a unanimous, we're going to go and have the Acting City Recorder please read the ordinance by title, number 1463, for the second reading.
Ordinance number 1463, an ordinance adopting a stormwater master plan and water master plan as support documents to the Gladstone Comprehensive Plan.
Any additional updates from the staff?
No, Your Honor.
Any further questions or discussion from the council? At this time, I'll entertain a motion for the approve the second reading.
So moved.
Second?
All right, the motion was made by Councilor McMahon to approve the second reading of ordinance number 1463. It was seconded by Councilor Sickman, and please do a roll call vote on the second reading.
Councilor Sigmund,
Yes.
Councilor Mercer,
Yes.
Councilor Johnson,
Yes.
absent Councilor Turner, Councilor McMahon,
Yes.
Councilor Reisner,
Yes.
and Mayor Jacobellis.
Yes. Second reading of ordinance number 1463 is approved, and the ordinance is adopted.
Thank you. That's great.
Okay, we're moving down to item number 7, Resolution 1066, authorizing full faith and credit borrowings to refinance outstanding obligations of the city. Ross, this is yours.
Yes, it is. About a month and a half ago, financial analyst from Piper Jaffray's gave me a call and said, hey, do you guys realize you got some debt out there that might work out to refinance? At that time, she'd done some estimates, and her estimates were in the neighborhood of $70,000 to $80,000 in savings by taking advantage of lower interest rates today. Since that time, I told her, yes, let's go forth. The state has requirements that you need to meet at least a 3% threshold or no refinancing. Since that time, she's done the work. We've gone through, we've posted bids, we've got a team together. Everything has run down the road as it should. She has met a 7% threshold rate. In the staff report, it says, looks like we could save about $70,000. The goldenrod sheet that you have in front of you right now indicates we'll save north of $100,000 after all the bids are in. We had 6 different bids for this refinance. So at this point, you've got the information and the resolution. I would recommend your approval. What questions may I answer for you?
Do we have any charter amendment problems with this?
We do not. We've had bond counsel review this, and they spent significant amount of time on that, and they're willing to sign off on it.
Okay, thank you. Sorry, I had to ask.
Nothing? No further discussion? Okay.
I'd like to make a motion that we approve Resolution 1066. Is that what we need?
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
I second it.
Okay, so the motion was made by Councilor McMahon to approve resolution number 1066. It was seconded by Councilor Mercero. And discussion. No further discussion? All in favor of approving resolution 1066, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Okay, resolution 1066 has passed. Discussion items. Item number 8, letter from Oak Lodge on behalf of Clackamas River Water Providers request to keep Lake Oswego transmission line.
And If I may, I'm the one who put this letter in the packet. What the issue is here is there is a raw water line that runs from Gladstone to the Lake Oswego water plant. With the new line that they have put in, their goal is to abandon this one, which means they fill it with grout, and it's basically like dirt as it rots out. At this time, the Clackamas River water providers would like the option to turn that raw water line into a secondary line that would come from the Lake Oswego plant to this side of the river. All they are talking to us about right now is just not filling that pipe with grout and not decommissioning it. They have not put together the project or resolution that you guys would take formal action on, so that's why this is under discussion. I guess is what I'd like to do with the amount of information that you have right now, which is pretty much the amount of information I have. Is there anything that would preclude you, or is there more information you'd like to get? Councilor Johnson can probably speak to this as well as I can on this one. So
yeah, I think I understand better after the meeting with Clackamas River water providers. They want, in case of a disaster or a plant failure on the Clackamas River, they want the option of bringing finished water back from Lake Oswego. They understand that it would end up in our water tanks, and they understand this would be a limited solution in any emergency situation. But they're fairly confident in what they're asking for. Unless there's a unknown cost to the city of Gladstone, I would say that might as well move forward with it. By the way, I believe we are a 10% owner in Clackamas River water. So even if there is a cost associated with it, we're only going to be responsible for 10% of it.
I got just a couple of questions for whoever. This is the existing water line that they are still using at this point until the big line is finished and hooked up to the tree?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
So, I mean, this could be in use for another year or two anyway.
They have problems with their new water line, and I understand that there are issues in West Lynn and pumping station. Some of that saga continues with them. So it may be a while, but yes, right now this is Lake Oswego's raw water line to the Lake Oswego water processing plant.
My only concern was if it was not in use, if it sets too long, it may not become usable. But it sounds like we've got lots of time to get lots of information.
That was one of my questions right away when I talked to Dan Bradley about this, is when you set an empty pipe for years, usually you need to put 100,000 gallons a month through them just to keep them chlorinated. But evidently they've done the research and they think that they can, by super chlorinating and then disposing of the water, then it's good to go again. So
an occasional mini flush takes care of it, I guess. So,
and they're willing to bear that cost as the river providers, water providers, excuse me.
Anything else? Anybody got heartburn with this?
Nope.
Not yet.
Good.
I think the only action that might come out of this conversation is if somebody says, hey, I'm going to go grout that thing, I would be back to council and you guys would have a more formal resolution. But at this point, I'll respond to the water providers that interest may be too strong a word, but at least we're not interested in decommissioning it immediately.
All righty. Business carry forward update on council goals.
I have none at this time.
Okay, this is the second opportunity for business from the audience. Anyone want to speak? Do we have any cards?
We have no cards.
Okay. Business from the council. Mr. McMahon.
A couple things. Just like Bobby was talking, I did go to the Rynearson project this morning meeting, and that's with the neighborhood association, with Falling Springs, and with the city. Went well. Everything, like he's talking about, everything is still moving forward. And then I spent an hour and a half this afternoon at the Robinwood Riviera Neighborhood Association. One of the homeowners that lives right on the pond there, he gave me a tour of some of the pond areas and some of the spaces that they use right now, and I'd love to live over there. I'd move out of the city in a heartbeat. It's a beautiful view right there. But so I spent 3.5 or 2.5 hours doing that today. I did hear from I go to the Marsala box, which is the new Indian food on Arlington, and he asked me about OLCC, and he told me that the OLCC is looking for, in this zip code, so the city of Gladstone, they're looking for another outlet, and they are looking for an outlet that is not strictly a liquor store, because he was interested in selling hard alcohol in addition to the food he supplies, in addition to the restaurant he has, and the small little store he has. So just FYI for you guys, the OLCC is looking to maybe put Steve's bar or Steve's discount store in town one of these days now. Instead of just a store, it would be, I think the OLCC is looking for a combination of some sort. So it would not be a standalone store, but it would be a place you could go buy fifths of your favorites. The other day, the mayor and I went up to Quezon and had a little bit of a town hall meeting with some of the residents there, and then we also celebrated Butterfly's 100th birthday.
Cool.
And then her friend, I don't remember her friend's name, Rose or something, and it happened to be her 98th birthday, so she was a little miffed that the 100-year-old got most of the publicity. And then just remind everybody, tomorrow at 8:30 we'll be at the Senior Center for a town hall meeting with the public, or with our employees here, for a dry run at the next week's meeting.
8:30?
I believe so.
Oh,
yes,
okay.
sir.
Well, unfortunately, I won't be able to make it. My schedule at work is filled up, so, but I'll do good next week, I'm sure. Brought up Jensen Road earlier tonight in discussion. I've been by there several times over the last 2-3 weeks, and I see that they've got the pipe across from the east side of McLaughlin to the west, but I haven't seen any real stuff happening. I know they still have a few more months to finish things up, but I know a lot of people like to walk using that, and it's been out of commission for a while. I was wondering as to can nudge Lake Oswego to maybe get things patched up so we can get our residents using it again. A month or so ago when we were talking about this, that, and the other, we were going to ask the county for an updated urban renewal district plan map. Have we?
We have not seen that yet, Counselor.
Okay,
Yep.
It's still in the works, I take it then?
I'm assuming.
Okay. And then I wanted to thank Steve. I know when he came on board earlier this year, I don't think he anticipated the North Clackamas Water Consortium, the Tri-City Service District, and Library. And I know that you've been working overtime in several of those areas, and I just want to thank you for
I keep
for
trying
that.
to put in for a raise, but they won't let me. But thank you.
To you.
And to Tri-City, the Tri-City CCSD saga continues. It's becoming more tedious by the day. I think, without getting into huge details, I could spend all night talking about it, but I think we are reaching a point where we're going to need some legal representation on a path forward, and what our options are and what the pitfalls are. I'm a little concerned, based on a meeting here a couple of weeks ago with Oregon City, a joint meeting that Mr. Elsner was at, and he was there as a representative for Happy Valley.
Mm-hmm.
That probably works okay with many other issues. I'm not sure that's going to work here. I'm thinking that we may need our own representation, an expert in that particular field, and one that represents the city of Gladstone in particular. So I'd be interested in your thoughts on that, and then I would be interested in getting some consensus from the council to provide direction to Mr. Schultz to work on maybe finding somebody like that.
Sure. So, yeah, as you know, we have other clients, and Happy Valley is one of them. That's been one of, when Jack Hammond and I joined up with Paul and Pam in 2004, Happy Valley was one of their clients. Gladstone obviously was a longtime client of Jack. So, there's been little, and this comes up, I was saying to Ross and I talked about it too, every once in a while, that happened with the Oregon City matter, and their fee. We'll get those, and, and I understand there may be some difference of opinion here between Happy Valley and Gladstone on the Tri-City issue too.
Just a little.
Just a little. So that's totally, I think, a wise thing. I do want to talk with Paul because it may be that we bow out also. We would have to bow out for both Gladstone and Happy Valley. I don't know how much he's advised Happy Valley on these issues. I don't do much work for them, but at some point, we like to, think that we talk with actually a lawyer that specializes in our ethical obligations as lawyers. We certainly did before the Oregon City matter as well. And so two things on that point. One, if there were an actual conflict, we would have to bow out. But number two, and I think, as important, is we want to make sure you're comfortable. And so, I would have no objection to that. I think that's perfectly reasonable. And I can even get you some names of people that I think would be, worthy candidates of that work.
Yeah, I think it's best to be prepared, and
Sure.
I'd like to get, somebody that we could talk to specifically about this before we get to the point where, oops, now we're all headed to court. So,
Absolutely. No.
and hopefully get advice that would help keep us out of that situation. But
Sure.
Does the council have a consensus on that, or am I barking up the wrong tree?
No, I agree, and you alluded to gentleman from a couple of years ago that I was very comfortable with that we used when we.
Oh yeah, Jeff Condit.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't
know if he's still available.
It may very well be him. I want to talk a little bit more. I mean, again, just for your benefit, as to what precisely he's certainly a candidate. There's a couple other people I have in mind, depending on the particular nature of the of what you're looking for. But yeah, he would certainly be there. And if you appreciated his work and felt that he did a good job, that would be certainly someone to talk with.
Mm-hmm. Just a quick question for you: are you looking for somebody for the city of Gladstone to consult with, or for somebody for the Tri-City Service District?
Specifically for the city of Gladstone.
Okay.
I mean, that's who we represent, and it's our interest that we have to look out for. So, yes, this would be specifically for the city of Gladstone.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And that's all I have. Thank you.
Mm-hmm. Mr. Mercer.
I attended Monday a coffee with the counselors, and we had some discussions over a few issues. But one that was kind of interesting was one I hadn't heard a request from, and I just thought I'd note it. One of the ladies that was there seemed to be quite involved in the Historical Society, and she seemed to note that the Historical Society did not have a formal place to in fact keep the historical records and or all the stuff they have. And I just wanted to make a comment that it seems like it would be appropriate to put some place in City Hall or the Senior Center or something. I don't know how much room it would take or anything else. I just wanted to note that there was a thought.
Well, I think I could see it getting crazy. I mean, but I could see the display case downstairs that's really kind of sparse. Yeah? Yeah.
Did you fill out a card there, sir?
All right.
Lockers. Anyway.
So noted. That's all I can say. Nobody's come to the city with a formal proposal from that group, and at that point, I guess I'd bring it to you guys, and it'd be a matter of space. I
have no idea if they're asking for 10,000 square feet or 100 square feet or 10 square feet.
And likely, I will say that probably the next city administrator will be able to deal with that issue
Oh, you gotta
better.
pound that one off, huh?
The conversation with that lady wrapped around that it's, these items are stored in garages or basements, and she said repeatedly the people who are storing them keep dying, and so they keep having to move to another home, and she was lamenting that there wasn't a more permanent space.
I mean, I've been in other cities where that becomes kind of a millstone. It becomes an additional cost for a city to store all of that stuff, and then pretty soon nobody's looking at it anymore except the city, and then the city becomes the one that's maintaining the active historical records. One city had a dead cat that had been one of the founders. I mean, at some point you got to go, you know, what's the city supposed to be doing? And, you know, we got to recognize our heritage, but, you know, you need, I guess I would leave that up to needing some wisdom from council.
Sherry's going to volunteer her basement.
No, I'm just going to ask, what kind of records are they? We operate the record center for the county and the court records, and are they microfilm? Are they digital image? Do they need to be scanned and turned into digital? So what happens if you have a fire and they all burn up?
Then they're gone.
Where's your backup records?
They're not.
Where's your security?
We have no history.
They're not ours.
Because the other thing, if you're going to build a new police station, make a bigger space for police records and rent the space out to the historical societies.
I got no money. But good idea.
Yeah.
Yes, Mr. Is that it, Tom? I'm sorry.
That's,
All right.
I want to make a note, that's all.
And I've been at the Coffee with the Counselor also. A couple of the topics were property taxes, street trees, cross park railings, and leash laws, and fire lanes on private property, and the rainy collector. Those are just things that have been brought up. I went to the Kiwanis breakfast this morning, and spoke to them about our town hall. Actually was quite a bit of interest there, lots of questions. And then they brought up a couple of things that they're working on. They are putting together a Veterans Day parade. I just got flyers from them this afternoon. I hope it's not just a draft. I hope they were finalized because I'm printing them and giving them out. And they've asked that if the council if they would participate. They're going to have a breakfast on the 7th, and then they're going to have a short parade through downtown Gladstone. After that, starting at 10 o'clock. So they asked if we would, one, help get the information out to our veterans, and two, if we would come down and be in their parade, maybe cook some breakfast, whatever you want to do. They would like to have our involvement. The other thing that come up is cops running cones. Every Tuesday from 5 o'clock till 10 o'clock this month. Baskin-Robbins is donating a portion of their proceeds to the Shop with a Cop program. I was specifically asked if Your Honor would maybe reach out to his friends by email or however and let them know what's going on in our town, and hopefully they would participate as well. They also asked that if we'd like to come down, they probably had ice cream scoops that would fit our hand, or they would accept some green from us as well. So, it's a good program. I hope that we find ways to support it. Question on the town hall. Two questions. One, we've kind of got a brief, an agenda going. Are you, as the MC, are you going to introduce each person, or is the person that's speaking going to introduce the next person?
No,
I'll just stand up after you get done. I'll introduce
Okay.
you next. Okay, now to this Steve Johnson, or whoever.
Okay.
I'll get
Okay.
it all up.
Evo though, so.
The second
No,
thing,
corrected that.
dress for that, council night dress, hell yeah. The second council meeting, business casual, any thoughts?
Since the city staff meeting is my meeting and you guys are doing your dry run, I believe that golf shirts are fine, regular work attire. What you guys want to do with town hall is up to you.
Just remember, town hall, the whole concept is we're all in this together, and, you know, we're common folk. We're just like you. Suit and ties just ain't cutting it in this town.
I just don't want Tom to be the only one that shows up in a suit and tie, so I thought I'd broach the conversation.
Big leagueist, that's what he'll be doing, is he?
We'll figure it out.
Okay. That's all I got.
Anything else? Okay, the only thing I have is really a kind of a question for you guys. One of the things we haven't done yet, and this has been since I've been here, is the Parks Master Plan. Supposedly there's money aside, there isn't, we might get more, we don't, this and that. This has been dragging on far too long. Can we please have maybe Ross reach out and see if we can get someone to shepherd this and get it kicked off? And could be like
Yes.
the initial start of this to maybe then become the head consultant or whatever firm, or I don't know how they do it, but just to get it started.
Yes.
And
Well, actually, I was going to send, I've been looking over what Ross presented. We have, and I was going to call Lee Woolridge, the chair, about calling a meeting this month to see if, he would do that. Because we do have a proposed RFQ from Tammy Stemple that has an outdated date because we've been sitting on this for so long. But I don't know really if we need to spend $5,000 to $10,000 on someone to shepherd this through.
Well, my only point is that we are now in October,
Right.
and nothing. We have zero traction on this particular project.
Well,
and so maybe it's time to spend the $5,000 to boot it and get it moving.
Well, no. Well, the reason I believe is that the last two meetings that the parks were going to have been canceled at the last minute because of conflicts with traffic safety.
Okay, so Neil, if they get canceled again, then we're into December, and then if they get
Well, they
canceled
won't
again, then we're in
They won't get canceled again.
Yeah, okay.
Okay.
My recommendation is just have someone start this project and get it moving.
Do we need parks to kick it off?
Well, if you want to tick off a lot of people because they're the one, why else do we have a parks board?
Well, to kick it off, though, to get it started, I mean, they can still be involved, but have somebody shepherd it, get it started, get it going, and then bring it to parks, and here are some options, here are some directions. We need some advice on this. What do you guys think?
Well, I think we've already done that. I don't think we need to pay someone to do that. I mean,
But it hasn't gotten done, Neil.
So, well, that's because
It was put off almost a year ago, I believe.
So, what do you think? Anybody else got any
Wanna
thoughts
do
on
another
it?
year? Or?
Maybe I can get some clarification. I don't believe our parks master plan is probably any different than any of the other master plans. It's probably a very high-level specialist thing. You're not talking about the parks board or committee doing the master plan, are we?
No.
Okay.
Well, why do we have to have a consultant to handhold the parks department when we just accepted two other master plans that we didn't have to hire a separate consultant to hold staff's hand on or somebody?
Well, and that's what I'm confused on. What is it that we need to do to get this started? Is Parks and Recreation going to
approve an RFQ to send up, a request for qualifications so that we can get people to submit their qualifications like we've done with all these other master plans to get get approval. And being that we don't have a Public Works Committee, that came through us.
Okay.
But since we have a Parks Board, it should go through them. So, in 2
Can
weeks,
that- can that be
my
done-
plan is to submit this information to them in 2 weeks, and then probably the first week of October to us.
That works for me. Last
Okay.
shot at it.
Okay,
Get it done.
sounds like a plan.
Thank you,
Good?
Neil.
Sure.
Thanks. That is the end of this particular city council meeting. Thank you and good night.
Thank you.
Good night.